Welcome to Let's Write. I'm Ryan, and I'm joined today, as always, by Alicia
Hello.
and Julian.
Salty jazz.
Ugh.
That feels worse.
Does it?
Yeah,
Feels
significantly.
worse and vaguely
Good.
dirty.
Good. It's all
Great.
going according to plan.
Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us on this special bonus episode of Let's Write. And as of recording, we are about 10 minutes removed from wrapping up our NaNoWriMo project this month, which, if you haven't been following along to the couple previous episodes we released in November, was a full script for our ideal version, or at least a version, of a second season of Firefly. Or I should say, the first episode of a second season of Firefly.
Yeah.
We didn't get a whole series or a whole season written in a month.
Not quite.
Did what we could.
Yeah.
And at least personally, I'm pretty happy with what it turned out to be. It was a bit of a struggle for a little while there, but I think we ended up with something I'm at least pretty satisfied with.
Yeah, I think I really enjoy it. It's fun to read. I think that's the most important part for me, is that it's enjoyable and you can hear the characters. And I think reading through the couple passes we've done at the end, it's playing out in my head and I can hear the characters interacting, which I think is really cool.
It definitely doesn't read like the three of us sitting on a couch in silence, just their heads in our hands, staring at a computer screen, each of our computer screens, which did happen more than once.
Yeah. I think
Part of the process.
Yeah.
for a month's worth of work,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty good.
I do too. I'm happy with it. I'm pleased.
It's highly fine. At least. No, I'm happy with it.
It's
I'm happy
shiny.
with it.
It's better than fine.
Yeah.
It's better than fine. It's shiny.
So Alicia, we've never done an episode like this before.
Yeah.
We've never done a full month-long project. But in light of that, you prepared a couple of kind of post-mortem questions for us, just to give us a little bit of a what would we say, a debriefing, I guess, on this project, how we felt about it, how it went. What do you got for us this?
So the first question, I guess, is when we, were first doing the first recording of this, and for those of you that did listen, you know this, and those of you who haven't heard it already, go back and listen. But it seemed like the three of us, I remember us all having very distinct things that we wanted to make sure that we nailed. Like we each had three different areas that were really important to us, and we wanted to make sure that we really just incorporated when we were thinking about this and starting the process. So I was just kind of curious about, what you two really wanted to make sure, because I know, Julian, what you were really wanting to nail, and Ryan, you, but I'd love to hear you guys put it in your own words.
I think if I remember, I think the thing that I was harping on, kind of like an idiot, was the rhythm of the dialogue. I think I remember talking just like, because I remember re-listening to our episode, and I was like, dude, you sound like a hippie. Like I was like, and the poetry and the rhythm of the. But I think that's the thing I wanted to make sure, especially in rewatching the pilot and then rewatching some of the episodes and Serenity the movie, that Joss Whedon quality of writing, but also that specific, basically kind of lingo and the slang and everything wrapped together that he created for that show, and just making, because like that, if that was wrong, then the whole thing was going to be off, because it wouldn't have sounded like it was the world. So I remember that being the thing that I was really focused on.
You were also really insistent about the time jump as well. You were real up on, because that was a pet peeve of yours, when there's a time jump in a show and they all act the same. Like it doesn't seem like any time has passed at all. And I remember you were really concerned about that as well.
I think I've seen so many examples of that happen, where it's like, and this is 20 years later, but it's like the characters, it like breaks me out of it breaks my suspension of disbelief when characters start delivering information to each other that like they like 100% you would have talked about this in a 10-year span of time. Like there's no way that you didn't discuss, because then it just feels like they're delivering information to the audience, and that's when I tap out. So I think I've seen it so many times, and I was like, we can't do that. It has to feel organic. These characters are so real, so much more real and fully rendered than a lot of characters in fiction, and we couldn't screw that part up.
I think that's where we came from it for all three of us, was we wanted to make sure that if we're doing the time jump, I mean, it's been 13 years since Serenity. We needed to make sure that the characters didn't just stagnate and they had evolved. So you wanted to make sure that that happened. I know that for me, it was about the characters themselves. Like I remember going back through and going, okay, if following like logically this character, how they probably have evolved in 13 years, would they say this line here? Is this how they would react? And so every time like writing something, I was constantly going back to, I want to make sure that whatever I'm writing here, this is absolutely how this character would act in this moment. And so it was a lot of it was figuring out like sitting down and kind of plotting through even before sitting down to write was how has this character's arc in the last 13 years evolved? So I know where they started or where we left them and how they've evolved. And I know like Ryan, for you, it was kind of the same thing with making sure it fit the time because you were really into the like you're always very into like the world building, the mythology, like you're always really great with that. And I know that you were really kind of insistent that like what would the world look like after a war, how would it evolve?
Yeah, I think it definitely comes back down to this, a decade and a half time jump and staying true to that, staying true to the characters. And I think one of the best parts of Firefly for me was the way that the world building kind of organically was seated in the background of things. By watching characters interact, by watching plots unfold, you started to get a real sense for how this universe functions, for how people talk to each other, how they live with each other. Just everything from government to religion to politics, to war, whatever in between. You really got to feel like a tangible sense of how this universe functions. And I wanted to make sure that we provided at least a little bit of that in this initial pilot, that you can start to see where things are going to start to come together in the background, how the universe has changed and how these new characters or these old characters have adapted to this new universe.
It's actually kind of, now that I think about it, pretty remarkable how much world building was done in a show that got one season, and a movie. I feel like there's more world building and you get more of a sense of like how that world and that universe, the verse functions in that 13 episodes and a movie than a lot of shows that have like 6-7 season runs. Like it's pretty remarkable.
I mean, there are a lot of shows that do mythology really well, like Supernatural, obviously, but Supernatural's been around for 37 years, and a few other shows, but I don't know. I'm sure there are, but I can't think of any show off the top of my head that established worlds more quickly in one season than I would say a couple of the sci-fi shows, like the newer ones. I would say The Expanse was good at that. Like that was really good. And then maybe like The Magicians, they were really good at it, kind of building a really broad world. But you're right in that it packed a lot into so little.
I mean, like even because I put particular emphasis on the pilot when I rewatched it, because we're writing essentially not a pilot, but episode 1 and
not a remake, but a what is it?
Like a revival.
Yeah.
It might as well be a pilot, right? Because it's like we're picking up after so much time. It's not the season 2. It's not like as if the adventures continued. Like it's a big, and so just like watching that pilot, I was like, Jesus Christ, Joss! Like it is a masterclass. I mean, every character has a moment. You have an immediate sense of who they are, what's important to them, what their values are, where they're going. The conflict feels organic and natural, and it has stakes, but it's also relegated to like all this is just like some backwater planet trade deal that's happening between Malzo and this. They're just trying to offload these goods, and everything kind of goes to shit from there. And it's just remarkable how well he was able to put together this. Like you could just take that episode on its own, and you could not see any more of the show and be like, "What a full story I just got!" It's really impressive.
I also want to point out for those listening, because I believe we discussed this in the first episode before we wrote the script, but just to reiterate, we decided to ignore all of the comic book, because there's been plenty of like comic book material. True. And like, ancillary material that has been built around the Firefly world since the movie, since Serenity came out. We ignored all of that. I have personally never read the comics, and so a lot of what we put in the script, if you've read the comics, like just imagine that in our universe, our alternate universe, the comic books and all the ancillary and like tie-in material doesn't exist. So we
Yeah,
kind of
we-
just we were like, okay, you know what? We figured a lot of fans will never have read this before, or will not have read the comic books. So let's just start from where Serenity leaves off,
Yeah, we found out.
just to put that in. Well,
we-
spoilers.
well, I found out about 20 minutes before we finished writing the script.
So did
that
I.
There was actually already a child of Zoe and Wash character named Emma, and we created obviously Hobie is the son that we created. So there's some divergences, to
Yeah.
say the least.
Yeah, so we definitely don't. It's not the comics. We'll put it that way.
What's up? What's next on our list of
Our list. So yeah.
post-mortem questions?
So that was kind of what we wanted to focus now on. Then we actually started sitting down to write the pilot, and writing is it's beautiful and terrible, because really the whole murder your darlings thing is never more true than when you're writing a script, I think, especially a TV script, because you get something, you love it, and then you're like, ugh, I just wrote myself into a corner.
Yeah.
And I think all three of us hit that
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we were sitting here going, so what for you guys, I know what was hardest for me, but like what for you guys was the hardest about finishing the script that you didn't expect to be hard even, but was?
I think for me, it was balancing this idea that this is a continuation of Serenity, but it also has to be something not brand new, but it has to be something new. And we can't just kind of spend an entire episode catching up with our favorite characters and watching them have an adventure. We really have to build in some kind of reason or a justification that this series exists, some new story that needs to be told in this universe with these characters. And I think that was particularly challenging for me, because I definitely felt the inclination or the urge to just hang out with these characters that we've known for so long and just watch them talk to each other and hang out and catch up and things like that. But there really was a need to kind of seed in, even if we weren't going to write it, these possibilities for, and I hope after you read the script, you'll at least start to see those seeds of those ideas that we wanted to explore down the line in the rest of the season. I think that was the main challenge for myself.
I think the hardest part for me, and this might be just a general commentary on screenwriting in general, I feel like with screenwriting as a specific art of or a form of writing, there's this sense, and you hear this a lot, that like every sentence, every word has to push either the story forward or the characters forward. Like it has to have a purpose. And there were several times where I was like, oh, I just come up with like ideas, but I don't actually think through like why does this have to be in the script? And there were like a couple times where I would tell you, like, Ryan, like oh, what if this scene instead was like this and this, and you were like, yeah, but like, do we feel like that adds something? Like, I'm not sure I see what that adds. And then I thought about it and I was like, yeah, I don't know what it adds either. So like, I guess there's no reason, it's like, so that part was that was tough. I think that's just something I'm gonna find, which is why I'm glad that we get to write treatments and get to write scripts as part of this podcast, because I feel like every time we do it, I get a little bit better at saying, like, being able to like analytically look at our writing and say like, okay, yeah, this is there for a reason. This scene has a purpose.
Ryan's
and it moves
definitely
something
the best
forward.
at keeping us like on track. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like Ryan was the one, we were writing this, was the one that was like, Julian and I would tend to go off road and be like, and then we could do this, and we bounce ideas off, and Ryan was just be sitting there just quietly like fixing a scene and be like, but does that add to the story? And we're like, what? Oh yeah, I guess it doesn't. So
I could certainly relate though, because I think we do love these characters so much. We just want to write a scene where it's just fun to watch them do stuff, and that we could have read 100 pages of them just kind of dicking around and catching up and being them same old selves. But it was really tough to kind of find what that story was that would be big enough to justify the series, but also kind of small enough that doesn't feel like it's a departure, doesn't feel like it's a whole another thing.
I feel like honestly the hardest thing for me was just getting them to the damn Serenity, like just getting them to the ship. Like it was the logistical part of it that, like the character interactions and the character beats, like that was the most fun for me to write. Like I didn't have a hard time getting the characters down, or being like, would they, like, yeah, this is something that they would say or think or do. For me, it was, okay, it was like simply the logistical like narrative. Like, okay, we have to get them to the Serenity. They need to enter the Serenity to take off. Like that we need to get them there. but what makes them head to the Serenity? Like, it doesn't make sense. So like, there were times we were like, well, they have ships, so why wouldn't they just go to their ship? Okay, so what if the ships are on the other side of the town and they can't get to them? Or like, okay, so but what are they doing like while they're like, why would they split up? Okay, so we have to have a reason to split them up. So it was less about the characters themselves, and it was a lot more, I know where we need to end up, but how do we get them there in a way that makes sense and doesn't just feel like a, Deus Ex Machina, or like a really, because what I hate, I know like you hate like the time jumps that don't evolve. I hate the super contrived thing or problem that happens out of nowhere where the writers just ran into a block and they had no idea how to get from point A to point Z, so they just shoved something in there like out of nowhere to like force the characters in that direction instead of it feeling organic, and I hate that. And that was the thing I had the hardest time with, I think.
I feel that a lot. I very much agree, because I'm the same way. When I get to like the dialogue or when you get the character beats, I'm like, it's like they're just talking in a room and I'm just writing it down. When it's like, okay, now logistically, and I found this for the treatments too, working on the treatments that we've written, it's the same thing where I'm like, God damn it, I for the life of me cannot figure out how they get from this part to this part in a way that's entertaining and engaging and worth someone's time.
Or you don't have to blow up like the entire like last 3 pages of something you wrote that you really love. And like, I think a bunch of the stuff I wrote got blown up in the sense like it got pulled apart and like stuck into other scenes because it was like they were fun scenes, but they just didn't work with the ultimate narrative. And so I think that's the frustrating thing. You're like, that means the last 5 pages are pointless. Like if we go in this new direction,
which at its core, I think is one of the brilliant parts of the original pilot, is that it's like you're just dropped into a day in their life and there's no contrived circumstances. It's like at its core, the crew of the Serenity needs to get paid and they need to offload these goods, and the new people that they meet just need passage for various, but everyone has a reason and they all kind of like collide in this wonderful way. But there's no like, okay, and then we have to get them to this planet because on this planet we have a cool fight. It's like, no, like they just need to go there because that's the only other option they have. The only person, they run through the list of contacts. This person won't buy, this person won't, I guess it's this person, like it never feels contrived. I think that's something I noticed. And in experiencing that challenge with our stuff, it's like, you really appreciate when you see something that's like, oh wow, no, like everything feels organic and like a natural progression.
So, we talked about the stuff that was harder than it had to be, but I'm curious about, there's also stuff that was the most fun to write, or was easier than you thought it was going to be. So now I'm curious, like the opposite side of that, like what were the parts that you guys thought would be hard, but that was a lot easier to write, or a lot easier to tackle, or a problem that was a lot more easily resolved than you anticipated?
I think, as we discussed before, that the plotting could be really complicated sometimes, figuring out how to get people from point A to point B. But I think what I personally found not easy, but a lot more fluid was once we started dropping them into action and started dropping them into things that like had a lot of movement,
You're a baller. Sorry, guys. I just have to point out, like almost all the great action scenes, like Ryan wrote, he is easily the best one of us at writing action. I was like, well, I'm just not going to write this scene because I'm just going to let Ryan do this.
Yeah, but if you read, or if you hate any of the action scenes, that was Julian.
That's fair.
That's
I think
that's the split.
I think I wrote a few action scenes. So if you hate it, it's probably because I wrote it.
But
I think once you kind of got them into a spot where they had to move and they had to talk fast and they had to go through something, it really started to feel like, and this is probably huge credit to Joss and his team, but they just started to feel really natural and be like, okay, what happens here? He says this, and then what happens here? She says this, and then she does that, and he does that. And then once you kind of like force, at least for myself, like yourself into that kind of a action-packed kind of mood, and you're flowing alongside the characters, I felt like their personalities just came through really, really easy, as opposed to, at least for me, I found really challenging is when things started to slow down and we had to actually have them have a real conversation. And then I was like really struggling to figure out what exactly they're saying to each other.
It's just funny because that I'm the exact opposite. It was the action scenes. I'm like, I think there was only one cool thing I did like in action. It was the shot where like River like kicks over her head and like kicks one of the Reavers in the face. And I'm like, that feels like a thing River could do, like weird bendy body that she has. But then the rest of it, like and in the scene, originally as I wrote it, like I felt like the action, you could tell I was so much less interested in that than I was in the actual dialogue that was happening throughout the action. So for me, it's the opposite. Like I loved writing the parts where they are having those like interactions and those kind of heartfelt moments. I really like the character building moments. It doesn't necessarily have to be like the quippy dialogue, although a lot of it is quippy with Firefly. But I found that for me, the easiest part was the character building. The hardest part was like the action scenes, because in my head, I just, like punch kick, but like I think character first. And so yeah, I was like reading through the action scenes that Ryan wrote in awe. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I literally never would have thought of that. I would just be like, he punches him here and then shoots one. And then Ryan has like this really fun like passage that's really interesting. I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely would have written that. So that was what I had thought was easiest.
Yeah, it's like in the beginning, we have this opening sequence with Zoe and her son. And it's like this kind of tense moment where he's out in space and stuff. And I had written
you did
like
a really good job with it.
It was okay. I written an initial bones of that where I think I wanted to put in something where he was in a high stakes environment to show that he was capable, and then Ryan did a pass on it, and I was reading it, and my like heart was pumping. I was like, this is so much better than the thing I had before
like,
that.
we'll just figure out this scene, this scene of dialogue between them. Ryan, you continue to write the action scenes.
To your guys' credit, like I did that initial pass of the first couple pages, and there wasn't even an action scene in there. I think they just like said hello to each other, and then it carried on. So it was
teamwork,
missing something.
I think I was gonna say, stemming off of what you were saying about the writing kind of flowing naturally and the conversations flowing naturally. There's a thing that James Gunn posted on his Facebook a while back about Guardians. It was like writing tips, and he said it's like stuck with me forever, where he was like, in my best moments, writing feels like I'm just like an interdimensional scribe, and I'm just like in that room, kind of in a corner, and everything's happening, and I'm just like, yep, and I'm just writing it down. And I actually heard it again recently when I was at BlizzCon, and one of the guys who was writing it was a panel about story and the cinematics, and one of the writers said like that he was working on the cinematic, and it got to a point where it was like the orc character was in the room saying like, I would tell him this, write this down. Okay, all right, I'll write this. So it's like, I think that was when it felt the most fun, and that's when it was the easiest, when like there was a couple scenes in the act 3 portions that I wrote like towards the end of the episode, where I was just like, there were just moments where like someone would say, I would write something, and then Jane would respond in my head before I wrote anything. Like he just talked back, and I was like, whoa. Like it was just, which I think you're right, is a big testament to how real and rounded and 3D those characters are that Joss was able to create.
I'm curious, like, who are your favorite characters that you wrote?
I just really like Jane, which is so weird because like I would say he's my least favorite character in a roster of characters that are all amazing characters. Does that make sense? Like not that I love him as a character. You
don't have to be that nice.
I genuinely love Jane. It's just like of all the other characters, I'm like, I like them all more, and I found his parts the most fun and weirdly the easiest. Like it was just like he's just always Jane, and I thought that was going to be really, really hard because he's kind of obtuse, and you never can quite predict when he's going to be soft and when he's going to be hard. And it weirdly flowed more than him, and Mal kind of flowed the most for me.
Which is funny because, in our previous episode where we did that 2-hour monster of an episode trying to break the episode down, we couldn't even figure out what to do with Jane, period, until like
I think
hour
we forgot
45
about
minutes
him
in.
for like the first, I think we were like, what is it, like 20 minutes in or something? I'm like, have we talked about Jane yet or something? Like, oh shit, no, we haven't. Yeah, so.
Him and Hobie too. I think I really enjoyed writing Hobie from the standpoint of like, I just wanted to make a child character who wasn't annoying,
Yeah, like the super angsty. Like, I'm so tired of angsty teens.
No angsty, no like, I don't care what anyone else who's smarter than me has to say. I'm going to do my own course of action regardless.
Thank you. That's what I hate most in young adult books, especially anyway, I'll go off on a whole tangent, so I'll refrain. But Ryan, what about you? Who's your favorite character to write?
I think my favorite character from the original series was Kaylee, and then coming into this new series, being able to write for her was a lot of fun. I think like being able to try to some extent to like capture that enthusiasm and that optimism without, and I think to the show's credit, they didn't cross this line without going into something somewhere annoying or somewhere that feels like ungrounded from reality is a little bit of a challenge. But I felt like once you started to get that voice, she really started to come through in the script, and it was a lot of fun to have that energy present.
I'd say I really liked writing her and Simon together. River was fun too, but River's I think fun only because she's like confounds everyone. I had fun writing them from different perspectives. Mal's fun because he has such a convoluted, such a old timey way of talking. So he's fun because you can just like really riff on his dialogue. River's fun because when she says something, it's probably going to confound the rest of the crew. But I think I had the most fun writing scenes with Kaylee and Simon interacting, just because they're, I don't know, maybe it was like my fan service myself, because I wanted to get them to get together on the show, and they finally did. So maybe it was just I got to write out their relationship. But yeah, Simon's actually a under low key like fun for me to write too, because he's a little deadpan, and I can always appreciate a good deadpan sense of humor.
Let me ask you guys this. If Wash, God rest his soul, was still with us in the series, do you think it would have been easy or hard to write for him?
Oh, easy. Super easy. Wash is like the quippiest, like he's super quippy.
You think though? Because he's got a very specific manner of quip. Because I was reading the script of the pilot as well after watching it, and just like there's lines where I'm like, I just never would have thought of this. It's so Wash, but like when he's like, and we will conquer this land with the dinosaurs, he's like, and we will call it this land.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Like, it's just so Wash, you know?
So weird, yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he has this really like sort of trademark kind of gentle but scathing humor to him. And I feel like to some extent
he's a nerd. He's the nerd of the ship.
we managed to like find room for his style of humor across all of the other characters in just little moments. And I think that was kind of interesting. It didn't feel like his presence or his personality was absent. It was maybe just present a little bit more in some of the other characters.
I like that. I like the idea that he kind of like left a mark on them, and his spirit is alive, not only in his son, but also in the other characters. That's nice. That's a warming thought.
And across all the characters, I think I just had a lot of fun writing swear words in whenever we could find the
Yeah,
opportunities.
that was probably the most fun. I think I had the most fun like putting swear words in
And for any doubters out there, we actually did find a PDF that was, I think, from this Firefly board game that had a glossary of all the Chinese swears. So it is ratified.
But it was the Chinese swears. It was the
slang,
the frontier slang. It was the space slang.
Yep.
It was the yeah.
So we went authentic as shit with this one.
Truly wonderful resource that we return to often.
Yeah. So it was fun. Then at a certain point, it was like, am I putting too many swear words in here? Maybe I should cut back. But I guess then, we were talking about like all the stuff we've been having fun writing. What was your favorite line or what was the favorite thing that you wrote? Not a character, but like a line or a scene. Like what was your favorite
like
thing?
a part of, or yeah.
That's a tough one. I might need a second. Do you have one comes to mind?
Yeah, I have. There's one line in particular that I thought, like when you just write a line, you're like, that character would say that. You're just like, I don't know
what one you're gonna say too.
You know, the ball just leaves your hand. You're like, it's good. It's a swish. Like that's just one of the. So the one that and there's a couple that I was like, I really like that, and I was proud of myself for that. But the one that I thought was the best was there's a part towards the end where River's friends save them from the Reavers, and they come up and they have a conversation with River and they bow, and Jane's like, man, I got to get me friends like those. And then Mal's retort is something along the lines
the day
of like,
someone bows to you.
yeah, Jane, the day someone bows to you is the day I ride a pig into the frozen hills of hell. And I was just like, that's such a, because he gives Jane so much shit constantly. Like he's like, if you like in the pilot, he's like, like keep your mouth clean or I'll stick. Like he says, he just is constantly like on Jane about his behavior and his attitude. So I just thought that was like like he would say that in this moment. That was my favorite part.
Yeah, that was my favorite line I think you wrote. And I know my favorite are Ryan's too. So I'm curious if Ryan's line is my favorite line that Ryan wrote.
Probably not, because I don't think I remember a single line that I wrote.
To be fair, this has all changed around so much that I feel like we've all touched everything. We've all touched each other.
Well, so the salty jazz episode apparently. I think for me, maybe not my favorite line, but my favorite sequence was the kind of the in the middle where they spoilers, I guess. Hopefully you've read the script by the time you listen to this post-mortem. But when some Reavers show up and the group kind of splits off into multiple groups, I think there's a really fun cadence that we found between River and Mal as they're fighting, and kind of a fun sort of beat to it where they're fighting and they're talking, they're fighting, they're talking. And to me, it felt like the most kind of Whedon-esque quippiness in terms of like the freneticism of how quickly the scene moved and in kind of time and with rhythm with how they were talking. That was really, really fun to write as well as just kind of read afterwards.
And I think that's something to point out too, that as far as like a learning process on this script, like I think something cool that I learned was, and it's something I've noticed, which I know I was mentioning to you guys as we were writing, is like I've noticed this with a lot of TV shows and some movies to an extent, where it's like a lot of them, if they involve like an ensemble in particular, oftentimes they will have characters branch off into groups, and they each have their own, like if it's an episode, they each have their own journey and arc over the course of an episode. And then when they edit the episode together, they kind of just take each, like if it's three different groups, they take those three sausages and they kind of chop them up and then just sprinkle chunks of them into each other and kind of cut them at points where the tension reaches like a fever pitch, and to create sort of a mini cliffhanger. And it's like, I think we found that in ours, we had these three different groups. We split off. River and Mal kind of went off and did something. Zoe and Hobie went off and did something, and then Jane, Simon, and Kaylee went off and did something. And I think when we were feeling like it was sagging was when we had three long sequences, one after the other. Where it got really good is when we were like, wait, why don't we chop these up at these particular moments where there's like a natural cut point and it's like a perfect like cliffhanger right here. And then we started to like rearrange them and sprinkle them in, and then reading back through it, I was like, this feels like a show. Like it feels like TV, where it cuts back and forth between different things that are happening. So I think that cadence was good too.
I think that was probably the one stretch that was like I mean, we worked on everything, but I think that was the clearest one where it was like our individual strengths came through, because I wrote those first two scenes as too long scenes, and I knew they were too long, but I didn't know how to fix that. And then when Ryan was the one that read through and was like, these feel too long and it's not moving it forward. He's like, I like the dialogue, but it's not moving it forward. And then Julian, you were the one who was like, what if we cut them up? And then, and then we all started talking. We're like, okay. And then we figured it out. So I think that was like the clearest stretch where it was like all three of us like distinctly had like a role to play in that.
And I think that's just a good storytelling structure. I mean, you see it in, like, you think about a show like True Detective, right? Like they're cutting between the past narrative and the present narrative, and they cut at points where it makes sense to create tension and create that feeling of curiosity.
There's screenwriters reading this going, yeah, no shit. Well, we're baby screenwriters, so
we're learning. This is the first time. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this is the first time I've like written this much in this series of a capacity.
I didn't get to talk about the favorite. What I did. That was I think I liked, again, it's gonna be like River or Kaylee and Simon. I don't know why, I just like this scene, like the visual of her like popping her head out from and then like being like, oh wait, and like popping back out and like giving him a kiss and then popping back in like to fix the serenity, like that little interaction between them. I really liked. And the one line, the Frozen Hills of Hell one, makes me laugh, that you wrote, Julian, and the one line that Ryan wrote that's not going to work in context if you're not reading it, but I laugh aloud literally every time I read it, is when they're splitting up and Mal asks River, he's like, you with me? And she's like, I never left. And he's like, yeah, in her weird way. And he's like, yeah, yep, like just like, cool, she's still weird. And I think the line about, are you still, what is it? Are you
oh,
still?
that was, yeah, I was gonna say
That might be my favorite line in the entire script.
Are you still weird? Yeah. Dude, I swear, I was like,
Oh, are you still weird?
that was like while we were on like I think it was over Thanksgiving, and we were all just kind of marinating on parts. And I know exactly what, like we were going out to dinner, and I got out of the car, and I was like, it was a car ride, and I was just like, my brain was just on this. And I got out of the car, and it was just like, I heard Mal in my head go, right now, are you still weird? It's like this. I don't know where it goes, but this has
Which is
to
fun
be.
because that kept ripping throughout the rest of the episode. Then, like with the one line where he's like, "Are they all what was it? Are they all strange betwixt the eye or strange betwixt the ears like you?" And she's like, "No, I'm the strangest." And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, like it all kind of carried through.
It's
So
just very Nathan Fillion. Like you can hear him
yeah.
delivering that line really well.
So here's one question: what is the one thing that you learned throughout this process, like a concrete bit of screenwriting, or like about the process? Like, what is one thing that you learned either to do or not to do, or like that from throughout this whole thing?
I think for me, it was to use. I kind of mentioned it already, but if I was to be a little bit more concise with what I'm saying, it's to use the end of a scene or the end portion of something as a moment to create tension and a curiosity hook going into the next scene. And I think I realized that that's the key to what I would call momentum in a film or a TV show or any like visual medium. It's like when something sags or lags, I realize it's because there isn't a sense of propulsion into the next scene. When it is firing on all cylinders, it's because each scene leaves you going like, what's the next thing that's going to happen? I want to get back to this, but I also want to know the next thing. So I think for me, it was using like act breaks, like not what the act is or the beginning of the act. What's the end of the act? Like what's like in this case, the end of our act one is Mal walks up and he's the mayor, and everyone's like, what now? And you can imagine going to commercial on that and being like, go back. I need to know what. So using the end as a tool for momentum was a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, it was kind of, I guess not getting over the fact, but like kind of getting better at the idea of making sure that in every sequence and in every scene, the viewer or the reader is taking something away from it. I think there were a lot of moments we were tempted to just do something cool where like a spaceship's about to crash or someone's about to get punched or, someone's quippy line, but then kind of have to take a step back and go like, okay, what did we learn there? And if we're not really learning something new about the character, if the story isn't being pushed forward, then actually when you go back and read it with a fresh set of eyes, you're like, wow, this is actually dragging. Even though it's an intense action scene or even though it's a cool, quippy back and forth, it actually feels like it's slowing the things down. And that's because you're not really taking anything away from that scene. And so for me, it was making sure that there wasn't really a separation between action and storytelling. It wasn't going back and forth, but that the storytelling was happening in the action or through the action.
I think for me, it was keeping the end goal in mind. Like, what is the end goal that you want on multiple levels? Where do they need to be? Who do they need to be? What do they need to do next? And making sure that, like, as I wrote each bit, or, one of you wrote each bit and I was going through and reading it, like kind of checking, doing like little spot checks all throughout the script and be like, okay, I just got through this passage. Does everything this scene line up to with what the end goal is, with who they are, and with where we know they're going? Otherwise, this needs to change because we're going to run into problems down the road where this doesn't, like the continuity doesn't work, or their characters really contradicting themselves. So I think for me was, like always, it's a little bit different when you're doing a movie script because it's one movie. It's just a couple of hours and beginning and end and 3 acts. But with a TV show, you know that they're going to be evolving and changing. There's so much more story. So I think it's always keeping that end goal and that end point, not just for the end of the episode, but for the end of the series, and then for the end of I know we talked about it when we had a writing session. And I was explaining, I think, to you, Julie, and it was like the 3 arcs or overarching stories is like the arc of the episode, the arc of the season, and then the much wider arc of the world around them, and trying to keep those 3 points and then all the character ones like in my head as I was going back through each scene and going like, okay, does this line up with where they're going to be? For sure.
It's a lot of it's a lot of following threads. It's like I visualize it as like you're in a room and there's like kind of like one of those crime scenes where you have yarn attached to it, and it's just kind of like, does this follow all the way to this thing? No, okay, you gotta move. It's a lot of that, and it's hard.
Murdering Your Darlings too is a big one. Like there was
Yeah.
that one interaction with Kaylee and Simon and Jane that I loved, and it was fun and it was lighthearted and it was super in character for them if they hadn't been in that scene.
Yeah.
And like there was a scene where it was like Kaylee and Simon are like getting like very flirtatious and cutesy with each other because they know it's making Jane kind of sick to his stomach and annoying him. And then Ryan was like, yeah, but like they're in the middle of this like really stressful like action scene. Like, would they be doing this? And I'm like, but maybe. And Ryan's like, no. I'm like, damn it. So that scene had to go.
I believe the term they used was this would be borderline
Sociopathic.
sociopathic behavior.
And I was like, it's not that. Okay, maybe a little bit, maybe. And we worked it in like, we worked that like tone like in and that like interplay, like that sweetness between them. We worked it in other ways, but yeah, the full on like them just like messing with Jane, it was fun and it was very much in character, but not for that scene and for the end
moment.
goal. And so it was like, man, fine, we'll get rid of it. Yeah.
I think like maybe one of the challenges of writing only a single episode, and not to say that we should have written 10 in this month, but like there's just so many moments and so many moments down the line in the season even that we want to write, and we wish that maybe even surpassed a lot of our favorite moments in this script, but because it's a pilot or because it's a first episode, it needs to set up certain things, they just didn't quite fit, and that was always hard, letting go of those moments.
Yeah, there are a couple of times like writing something, you're like, I feel like the scene's gonna happen, but it feels a little bit too soon. Like the one scene that one got cut with the little interaction between Simon and Jane.
Yeah.
Where they kind of bury the hatchet, so to speak. Like it was a really cool moment and it was a really good moment and it was a character building moment, but it wasn't the right moment. It was like, okay, this is not a pilot moment. This is maybe like a episode like 2 or 3.
For sure.
Like there's just no room. Like this needs to happen at some point, but there's no room for it in this episode.
Which I think is actually a really good segue into just kind of wrapping things up. Obviously, the script will be out as of the airing of this episode, so you can read our full script of our pilot. But because we didn't get a chance to write the other episodes, something we thought that would be
just because, in all our spare time with our full-time jobs and our other stuff going on,
write 9 more of these. What we thought would be cool to do instead was to do basically little, maybe a little bit more than a synopsis, but like a couple paragraphs outlining like the major beats of all the episodes of the season. So you can read the pilot. And then also we'll be releasing these over the course of the weeks in December. You can kind of get an idea for like what each episode would have been in our imagined 10 episode revival season. So that's something that you guys can look forward to.
I believe you've set the ambitious goal of doing custom artwork. For
I'm gonna attempt to do. If you check out the script on our website, letswritepodcast.com. Is that correct?
Letswritepodcast.com.
Yeah, you'll be able to see the custom illustration that I did for the cover of the script. So I'm going to attempt to do little sketches, thumbnail sketches of cool moments from each episode.
You could have seen some of the important illustrations that I was going to contribute as well, but Julian said
it was just going to be Paddington, wasn't it?
Save our stick figures for a more important episode down the line.
I would have guessed Photoshop pictures of Paddington on the Serenity.
Oh, I have access to the back end of the server, so I can replace those anytime I want.
It's just the key art from the show, but their faces are Paddington. Anyway, yeah. So guys, go to our website. You can check out the full pilot script. All right, I keep saying pilot, but the full first episode script is up there, and then stay tuned to our Twitter at Let's Write Pod. We'll be dropping the episode synopses there as well as on the website, but you can check those out on both our Twitter and our website. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be back in December.
We also have the Man from U.N.C.L.E. treatment coming too.
Oh, we do. Yeah, that's right. I probably should plug that as well. We'll be dropping our long overdue treatment for our Man from U.N.C.L.E.
and
sequel.
At some point,
the Argentina affair.
and at some point, this is on me, the Black Widow treatment. So.
And then,
it turns out, guys, writing treatments for every single episode we do is a lot more work than we realized.
It's a bit of an undertaking, but we do it for you, dear viewer.
Yeah.
And it's a task that we don't take lightly. We stick to our guns as best we can.
Yeah, so I guess to recap, since that's quite a bit of content, we'll be having
Ryan always keeping us on track.
The Firefly Season 1, Episode 1 script is available now, and over the next 3 weeks of December, we'll be releasing 3 of the episode synopsises a week, along with some beautiful illustrations by Julian. And as well as the Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Black Widow scripts sometime this
have
month as well.
Plenty
And
of holiday reading.
that'll be our
and
last
listening.
2 treatments of the year, unfortunately, or fortunately if you hate reading them, I don't know. But hopefully you're enjoying them as much as we're enjoying writing them. But to keep things flowing through the end of the year, we'll actually be releasing 3 bonus episodes that'll be kind of smaller episodes that won't include a treatment, but it'll explore some kind of fun ideas that we've been playing around with for alternate kinds of Let's Write episodes. And then in January, we'll see you back here for another full-length episode and another full-length treatment.
Bye, guys.